Well, welcome to my channel. I am so grateful that everyone is here. I am honored to have a special guest, which I will introduce in just a moment. But today we'll begin a three-episode summer series on belonging, school culture, and joy of the work. Now, this is exciting for me. My channel is very new, and this is my first series, so I am honored to have Anita with me. This channel has been created to share the good for the greater glory of God. So, although you do see my name in the title, I want everyone to know, just so it's crystal clear, that I am his vessel. And I pray that my words and my actions will always glorify Christ. So, with that said, today we're going to talk about how summer offers school leaders this amazing opportunity to pause, exhale, and reflect before the new school year begins. And we'll be welcoming back our faculty and staff, our school teams, in just a matter of weeks. So, when we talk about today's social, uh, emotional sense of belonging, um, let us reflect on what kind of cultures are we creating in our buildings. And I just want to give you four reflective questions as we dive deep with our special guest today to see what can spark your creativity. Um, what kind of culture are we building or hope to build and maintain? Do those we serve feel seen, known, valued, and connected in mission? Where is joy visible? That's important. And where does belonging need to be strengthened? I have the privilege to have served over 160 schools during my 28 years of serving in Catholic education as a teacher, well, paraeducator, teacher, assistant principal, principal, associate and assistant superintendent. And so I, throughout all of those roles, the topics that we're going to break open with Anita over the next three episodes are essential. They're essential not only for us as leaders, they're essential for our teachers, our whole entire team, regardless of the roles that people are serving on, so that we can be our best for the students and parents placed in our care. So I'm especially welcome Anita, Dr. Anita Harkins-Mehsling, Associate Superintendent for the Archdiocese of Omaha, brings more than 30 years of service in education, and her research and best practice strategies that she will share with us focuses on helping school leaders create a stronger sense of belonging. Now, Anita, as I mentioned, this is my first episode, so there's no rules other than have fun with it. You'll see that I have my Bible in hand because I always pray before I present. And today, when I just broke open the scripture, Psalm 16, verse 11 says, "You will show me path to life, fullness of joy in your presence." Amen. So today, I want to ask the Holy Spirit to be with us as we enter into this conversation that we began um, before I retired, while I was still assistant superintendent for the Archdiocese of Washington. And then we took it up again at the beginning of this year in Omaha, where you created an amazing conference, making sure that your teachers and school leaders knew that they belonged and they were worthy of the call that they answered. So I'm excited. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself that you would like the audience to know?
Well, thank you first, Denise, for letting me be a part of this new venture with you. I know you and I have talked about it many different times, and I was like, I'm all in, I'm all in. And then when you called me, I was like, oh no, I don't know if I'm in. But so I am so excited to be here with you. Like you said, over 30 years. I'm not going to give those exact years because a woman never divulges her age. But so blessed that I've been able to work in middle schools, high schools, University. Most of my career was in the public sector with public schools, but then I made the leap to a private institution for higher education. And then about 4 years ago, I came over to the Archdiocese of Omaha, and I've been loving it ever since. One, I get to celebrate my faith every day with everyone out loud, which is so beautiful. And the other piece of it is I'm at that point in my career where I have the joy of sharing with others
Mm.
things that I did wrong, that I did well, to help them become better at what they do in schools, because the end product is for us is to bring Christ to our students, but even more importantly, to make everybody's lives better than when we found it. And so I'm just it's a magical time in my life. So I am so excited to talk about belonging with you. It's near and dear to my heart. It was the first thing I went to when I did my dissertation, and yes, just lots of things.
I love that. Anita, I will say that I felt honored to receive your some of your research. And as I sat with it and reviewed your research, I was so inspired by your writing, and your passion poured out in the work that you shared. And that's really hard to do when we're talking about research and how research affirms the study or our thoughts and what we're working on. So um, I'm really excited for you to share with school leaders and educators who will be listening to our conversations, because I think that if our goal is to make a difference for at least one, someone who feels called to serve others in education, then we are doing our job. Um, I will say in your research, I know that there was a focus in on students and a student's perception, and that's really near and dear to my heart too. So this is just a planting a little seed for a future series talking about how we as leaders create these environments in this to feel for all of those that we serve to have a sense of belonging, to have a positive school culture so that we can have joy in the work. Like you said, this magical time in your life. We want everyone to experience that all the time when they come to their school campuses. So I'm excited about our conversations now and what's to come based on your research. So when we talk about the word belonging in schools, it can sound simple, but it is actually very deep from your research and experience. And I'm reading off my notes, by the way. I take notes and I write. So don't be distracted by that, everybody. I always try to stream in the spirit and take notes as they come to me. But as we talk about a sense of belonging, can you define that for us in a school community? What does that mean? I saw in your research that you have uh, you cite a few researchers on this, but what does it mean to you in in your experience? Can you give us a little definition of it?
Yeah, if we take it down to the bare nubs or the root of it, belonging means to go with.
Mm.
And when you look at research, and it doesn't really matter the venue in which you're looking or the lens in which you're looking through, whether it's school or church, community, work. The definition seems pretty static, and that is, it is the sense that a person has of being cared for, seen, felt to be one with the group, and most importantly, perceives that they are one with the group. And when I first started studying just the idea of what is a sense of belonging, in my mind, perception was always a part of it, but that's not necessarily true. When you look at the very beginning, specifically with education, of where does this sense of belonging come from, it actually started in the 1970s. And here's an interesting, I thought, a very interesting beginning to all of this. A researcher by the name of Dr. Tento wanted to look at like student retention more specifically at university level, but this pertains to anything at any level, of why people stay. Why do people stay where they're at? And what he found was that it had to do with this sense of feeling like they belonged.
Mm,
And what he did is he took Dr. Durkheim's research that he did on his theory of suicide, which is really the twist here. And he looked at that, and what Durkheim addressed was the reason at the time, now this was in the 70s, he believed that suicide rates were increasing is because there were more and more people in our society feeling like they did not belong, were not
mm.
heard, were not seen, did not perceive that they had a community.
Isn't
And
that
that's what,
interesting? Because that's from
yes,
1970, and that's before the boom of technology, where
mhm.
we're even that much more isolated.
Right. His Durkheim's conclusion is in the 70s was people who commit suicide were people who were not completely integrated into their culture or their societal
Mm,
pieces. And so Tento took that and ran with it with regards to student retention
mm,
on a college campus. And then you fast forward to 1998, he revisits his research again, and he finds out that not only is it being seen and heard, but it is the student's perception of belonging, which is key, I think, in our schools, especially as we continue our series, when we think about what are we doing and saying and being in a certain space so that our children are they belong there. And of course we're doing all the things as an administrator, as a parent, as a teacher, as a paraeducator, as a cafeteria manager, as a maintenance person, everybody, right? We want our children to be welcomed, we want them to feel warm and invited, and that they belong in the school. And what Tento found in the late 90s was now it's kind of turned a little bit because we needed to add that child's perception
mm,
of that, because we can do all these things and make our rooms beautiful and bright and wonderful. And we know this now, especially with our children who are neurodivergent, and they walk into the classroom and it's everything but, it's painful, overstimulated, all these things because of their perception of what's going on. And it was really, it comes along with some of the research that came in. How do we work with children who have different abilities?
mm,
And so we want to make sure that we want to make our students, our children, our colleagues, our family, our brethren welcomed. To do that, we have to ask them. We have to be a part with them of what is it that makes you feel like you belong here? What makes you keep coming back? What makes you feel so warm? You know, the interesting thing is when I first met you, Denise, I was immediately attracted to being in your aura. And
aw,
the reason for that was not only are you well spoken and you are very well versed in education, and you had such a mind, a safe of all these things that I wanted to crack open and be a part of,
oh,
and
thank
you're a beautiful person, but it's the way that you receive people.
you.
And my father used to tell me that I had different relatives that would make you feel like you were the most important person in the room.
Mm,
People who have that gift are going to from the very get-go give a sense of belonging because they just eke it. Not all of us are good at that, some of us better than others,
mm,
but just because we may not be creative enough to do that or gifted enough to do that ourselves doesn't mean we can't learn strategies so
mhm.
that we can make our spaces better for the people who are coming into them.
Oh, thank you, Anita. Well, one, thank you for your kind words, and I am honored to call you colleague and friend. Um, I I believe that when we train our eyes to truly see, it's a muscle. And the more we exercise that muscle, and that kind of lends into, I'm a systems thinker, as you know.
Mhm.
And I really feel that it's not only important to have the conversation, but as school and system leaders, as classroom teachers, it's important for us to think about a framework and have maybe not the full plan, because I'm a big proponent of red lines through lesson plans, because that means you're being intentional to the environment at the time. But to have the plan, to have the framework really allows us to be the best that we're called to be. And so that's why I'm excited about this series, because we're talking about it. On July 6th, we're going to be given strategies to help implement. And then that should hopefully lead to joy of the work and a reminder of why it is a gift to serve in education, whatever governance model that you're serving in. So I love the distinction that you made about being present and truly feeling connected. And the student's perception should always be at the forefront of our mind, because that's our why. That is why
Mhm.
we are choosing, why we took up the mantle when we heard the call to serve in education. In my own work around school culture and teacher retention, I have seen over and over again that people can be in a building every day and still feel unseen or disconnected. And that's where having this discussion now in the summer and kind of jotting down a plan of how am I going to welcome back my team? How am I going to welcome back my parents, my students? How am I going to make sure that the custodian does not feel isolated and is on point with mission and joy of the mission when I welcome everybody back? Those are all important things for everyone to feel connected and unified. Because I believe when educators feel, and when I say educators, that is everybody who serves in a school, because we all teach in word or action, regardless if we're sweeping the floor, cleaning the toilet, serving the meals, answering the phones, teaching, we all teach, right? So, in educators, that's my universal language definition, and that everyone needs to feel they belong, and the entire school culture is strengthened then, and student learning is reflected in that. Belonging is not extra. I learned this in your research. It's not just a nice thing to talk about at the beginning of the year. It is foundational to how people experience the mission and the relationships and the daily life of the school. So, when we talk about why belonging matters for school leaders, and for all the educators who will watch this who are aspiring to be a school leader, my question to you is, why is belonging such an important topic to school leaders to reflect on when they have this pause in the summer? We talked a little bit about framework, but can you break that open a little bit?
So I think it's very important to talk about it in the summertime for many reasons. One, this is the time of year where administrators or building leaders are finally taking a breath,
Mhm.
right? Especially in July.
Truth.
June, you're still wrapping the year down, summer school, getting everything ready, purchased or at least budgeted for the next year. July is really when you have a chance to really reflect yourself,
Mm.
look at what were my goals for the year, what were the things that I as part of a team wanted to achieve,
Yes.
where were my students, right, at the end of the year, or if I'm a brand new administrator, just like you said, Simon Sinek says it the best: lead with your why.
Yes.
Lead with your why. And
Yes.
I've adopted that in the leadership program that I've developed for the Archdiocese of Omaha, because when you lead with your why, you don't leave people wondering and guessing. And you've created your own narrative so that people don't insert their own narrative for you. And so when you're reflecting over last year or you're reflecting forward as to what is it I want to do, you have a little more elbow room to try some things out. Much like you, I take lots of notes, like scribbling down what went well last year and how can I readjust it this year. And oh, by the way, I have some new teachers. How do I need to address that? It's that almost like when you're a teacher and you're planning your year, you're planning your unit. You're trying to look for all the possible things that could go wrong. You're looking for all the wonderful celebratory pieces, but you're also looking for where am I going to have to put my work, my
Yeah.
focus.
Yeah.
And what the research tells us, again, across all avenues, is when you have people in a workplace that are disengaged, and disengagement can look different for different places. In a school, that looks like coming in late, maybe not turning in lesson plans or other pieces on time. It could be not volunteering for different committees or staying after school to work on things, or inviting students to work with you after school, before school, contacting parents. Like there's a lot of different ways disengagement can look. But the disengagement happens because that person does not feel that they either been seen or heard.
Yes.
And so, as a building leader, it is our onus to know and to always keep in touch with all of our teachers.
Pulse check.
Because, the stereotyping of, well, if they're involved with all these committees and stuff, they feel belong. Well, do they?
Right. Do
Right?
they?
Maybe that's a
Yeah.
way, that's a dissonance, right? That's a way to keep them from doing the work with the students, which is the purpose or the why that they're there. Or the teacher who doesn't join all the committees and doesn't go for the after meeting at the pizza parlor, right? Or whatever. Well, maybe it's for another reason. So it's really, you have to be very aware of your environment, what
Mm.
it looks like with joy, what it looks like without joy, but more importantly, the in between, so that you can mitigate the damage of people who become disengaged.
Yeah, I love that. I agree that such an important point. School leaders during the school year are moving from one urgent matter to another, and um, I know you've seen in your archdiocese when I was in the Archdiocese of Washington, I had over a third of my school leaders were also teaching because
Mhm.
nationally we're in a phenomenon of teacher retention. And so summer does give leaders that sacred pause to not only think about the schedules and the invoicing and if it's a Catholic school, the tuition that needs to come in to make the salaries get paid, etc. But um, it's important for us to take this time and kind of think about, like you said, um, where should I be focusing and how should I be focusing and have a plan in place as we get ready to welcome our teams back. So, what are some questions that we can encourage our school leaders to ask during during the next few weeks to assess whether belonging is strong in their community, and maybe some questions that will help prompt them as they join us back on July 6th to gain some strategies
Mhm.
on what they can do to implement.
Again, going back to Simon Sinek, is asking yourself as a leader, what is my why this year?
Great.
Right? And beyond the, I'm here to bring Christ to children and to help them with their Catholic formation and to give them a rigorous education so they become productive citizens. Beyond that, what is your why?
Mm,
Because once you can answer that why, the how, when, where will fall into place. And so it's always starting with your why. And then the second piece of that is, schools are for students, absolutely, and it's about their joy, absolutely. But as leaders, we cannot forget that there is it is absolutely impossible as for a leader to be able to produce that joy if we didn't have our teachers and our volunteers and
amen.
everybody else in the school. And so what are we going to do for them so that they feel reignited for the school year, that they feel that passion for education, that they know their why. And Maslow even addresses this like on tier 3, I think, of our needs, right? Safety, security, interactions with people, right? We all need that. So how are we as leaders fostering those very personal, productive, and sometimes uh, immediate interactions? How are we going to provide that, allow that? How are we providing that for our community, for our clergy? It is about the kids, but before we can even get the kids, we need to get our adults. Because if we have our adults all there for a similar purpose and they all feel they belong, you have to not work as hard to let the children feel that they are belong, because they're going to feel it. They're going to sense it the moment they walk into a building. I often tell principals when I come out to a building, to meet them for the first time, or I come out because they're asking me for advice, I can sum up within 5 minutes of being in that building what the culture is.
Yeah, that's so true. and we'll just kind of slide into our next conversation, but I agree with you. I used to my school leaders, I would say to them, summer is not the time to take off. In fact, it's so important not only for your well-being, to pause and reflect, but to grow so you can be the leader that you were called to be for the following school year, but also to build the framework, the connection with your team and your parents, parish community, whatever that might be. Um, and I believe that connection that you're talking about, and that's why I get so excited about these kind of conversations because it starts now. It starts in our language to our team about where I'm excited to welcoming you back, for parents and our school teams. Um, I hope you take celebrate the birth of our amazing great nation with your family. Turn off your email, don't answer it. Those little things, it sets a tone, right? It sets a tone of gratitude and it starts to begin and plant seeds of team that are so important when we talk about that culture and that perspective that I want to share with my team what my perspective is. I believe probably everyone, as you know, knows what my perspective is. I'm all about the Holy Spirit and let's go.
Mhm.
And everything is all about joy. But I think that, like you mentioned, the new teachers and the new team members coming on, how can we begin to think about these next few weeks that I want them to get to know me too, right? Because we have just a short amount of time to get the foundation right for the school year. And the playbook that happened in the 25-26 school year should not be the playbook we're bringing forward 26-27 because it's a new batch. It might be some of the same students, might be some of the same faculty and staff, but it's a new year. And so how do we carry that on? So I know we've spent a lot of time talking about the school culture. So what do you think? How does belonging shape that culture of a school? Is there anything else that we can, some nuggets of wisdom, to kind of help frame even our conversation on school culture on July 6th? What are some things that we can plant seeds for those watching who can begin to reflect on and journal on?
I tell our new leaders a lot that you have to think of the front of your school or the first interaction people have with your school, almost as if when you're inviting guests over to your house.
Yeah,
Right? We all do the same. We tidy up, we make sure, right? We tell the kids to pick the toys up, we tell our husband put his shoes under the bed, whatever it might be. But we're also creating an atmosphere
yeah,
of joy and love and welcoming. And it's just kind of a little funny story. My kids always said to me, Mom, our friends always want to be here. Like our friends are always here. Now I can say this as an older mom, I did that purposely so I knew where they were at and who they were with.
wisdom.
However, I have friends say the same thing, and I'm like, I don't have this big mansion, I don't have the best furniture, and what people say to me is, Anita, whenever we're in your house, we feel like we're home.
What a compliment.
And I kept on wondering, like, what am I doing? Did I bake brownies today? Does it smell really good? But not to make light of it, but it really has everything to do with, are you being genuine? Are you being
Ah,
authentic? You
yes.
know, I say this to people all the time. Children and horses can tell if you're full of it, right? They can tell
They
immediately.
have a truth
So
meter.
yes, and so be authentic, be authentically you. And so I've learned to live with that. And sometimes, most times that works in my favor. There have been times in my life that authentic Anita was not the right thing. And I've learned that, right? You learn from it and you make sure you move on from that. But be authentic. Create a space in which people feel that this is where I was meant to be. And that starts with walking in that front door,
Yeah.
right? What colors are you using on the wall? Well, but our school colors are gray and white. Okay. Well, what are some beautiful faith filled pictures that you can put on those gray or white walls that emanate warmth? That, right? Like, think of those things. Well, I don't have money to repair my stairs. Okay. Are there pots of plants that we can strategically place, right? Or a mascot or whatever to take care of? Right? There are things we can do that don't always cost money, but it does take time, presence, and intentionality. And you can't do it alone. That's where you fuss a little bit, and then you have the secretary come look at it, or you have your friend come in and say, just tell me what your first impressions are, or whatever it is you need to do. I know it may sound like you're staging, but you're staging with authenticity. This is truly who we are at St. X School, right? And to be here is to be loved and to be cared for. And this is how we're going to do it. So you get them in by that authentic staging. You keep them because you give them a sense of family.
That's it. I love that. It's so true. And even though sometimes society will say, to be your authentic self, you have to share all. I would say to my teachers, my school leaders, that when I was a principal, I used to give my team a pair of red little sneakers every year, and it was a reminder. I'd put it on their desk when I welcome them back, and in our welcome back meetings, I would say the red sneakers are a visual reminder to you. Whatever bad day you had in the morning, you know, flat tire, etc., you still need to come in and put on your red shoes and dance because it's that important to be your best authentic self, your best version for the students and parents. And so by really thinking that through and creating that mindset, it's important. We're going to talk more on July 6th, so we don't want to give up all of our special secret sauce. But we're going to talk when we talk about school culture. You and I are going to open our joyful toolboxes and share some strategies. And one of them is when we talk about schools not having a lot of money, how we can leverage community relationships. So we've got a little couple tools, and you and I have worked together on that actually as well. So
Mm-hmm.
we have a few little tools and resources and strategies to share on that regard. So I love that.
And Denise, it's really, I love the fact that we're talking about this as well, because um, for not such a great reason, honestly, as you and I both know, and as a lot of our leaders across the country and educators know, more and more we are receiving beautiful children, God-given children at our doors, and we are the only sense of family they have.
Yeah,
And that is not a socioeconomic situation.
that's right.
That is a
Yeah.
cultural, that is a community, that is a social situation that goes across all socioeconomic levels. And we need to be prepared for that, so that at least 8 hours a day that child is loved and cared for and is seen and heard and know that they belong here.
Yeah, we're going to talk about and joy of the work. You're absolutely right because the chaos of the world, right? And I'll call it a screw tape moment for those of you who read C.S. Lewis. Um, but screw tape, I call it a screw tape moment because the world wants us to stay on the chaos wheel. Because if we're on the chaos wheel, we're not calming our spirit, we're not being intentional, training our eyes to see the good and share the good, and we're not being our best versions of self for students, right? So we want to get off that chaos wheel and we want to be reminded that our classrooms, our schools are microcosms of society. And post-COVID, there's a plethora of research out there about we forgot how to have barriers as teachers, parents, as adults for students. And so it's always a good conversation to have. How are we making sure we're not bringing the world into the classroom? How are we making sure that we are light and peace and joy distributors, regardless of our faith, regardless of the school governance model, for the students and our parents placed in our care? I spend a lot of time talking to school leaders on the importance of creating a parent workshop. Not because our parents aren't amazing. They're doing the best they can, and I truly want to believe that. But many of them are stuck on the chaos wheel of society. So how can we give workshops and give our parents strategies to say, hey, here are some good strategies based on research. We are educators. We do know how to share the good and what we learn. And so you're right. We have to be mindful that the environments we create for belonging, for school culture, for the joy of the work, for our why, we have to remember to keep that society at bay. Sometimes school leaders may not realize the people in their community are feeling disconnected. What are some signs of belonging that may need attention when we're talking about our community at large, talking about those parents? Are there any kind of, in your research and in your experience, can you give us a handful of flags that we can reflect back on the 25-26 school year to say, you know what? That was something I can work on for this upcoming school year.
Mhm. So the number one characteristic is the lack of presence.
Mm,
You have the shell of a person, right? We are so trained and very eagle-eyed to see that in children.
mm.
We just need to realize that how we look for it and notice it in children is the same for adults. It's
Yes.
no different. So you
Underscore
have
that.
yes, and so that shell phenomenon, right?
Mm,
Pete Buttigieg, when he was putting his toe out there to see if he was going to run for president, he coined a term that I think really is essential for us to understand. And he said, "Our society is in a crisis of belonging.
mm,
That from birth to death, we no longer know how to create situations so that everyone can belong."
mm,
And, depending on who you are and where you are, there's so many reasons for that. But the absence of presence, so that shell effect is a red flag no matter what. It's a sign of that crisis, right?
mm,
The other one is are are the people in your sphere that you work with, live with, are situated with, are they sounding different than they've sounded before? And that could be both what they are, but even more importantly, what aren't they saying?
mm.
An absence of language. So, absence of presence, absence of language. And the third, and probably the most important one, especially for us, is the lack of a higher power.
Mm.
Now, for us, it's, Jesus Christ, our Savior, right? But you can extrapolate that out to whatever religion, whatever your spiritual belief is. Are are you absent from that?
Mm.
Because as I have experienced myself and I have heard from others, when we are called back to the discipline of being Catholic again, we recognize the absence we were. And that could have happened even sitting in the pew every Sunday.
Sure.
And so it's the absence of presence, the absence of language, and the absence of the higher power that really start sounding those alarm bells that belonging is waning.
So that's really helpful. So when we talk about strategies in school culture on July 6th, we can talk about how can we address these areas
Mhm.
in table talk when we bring our teams back and welcome them back to campus, having parent coffee hour, and how we can kind of do some our own little sample testing to see what's going on our campuses and how we can build them up. So that's powerful. It's so important because belonging, as you is often felt before it's named. As you mentioned, a person might not say it, but it's the absence of that they are communicating that lack of belonging. Um, I agree that this is why school leaders need to listen deeply, observe carefully, and create spaces where people can share honestly and safely. You know, when I served on Monsignor Chuck Kosanke's team, one of the highlights of my career, and he's now a friend and mentor. Um, he took our leadership team to the amazing parish conference in Colorado. And something that stuck with me when we talk about the creating those spaces, it takes the whole team, right? And that's where it's intentional. It's important to have these intentional reflection times before we
Mhm.
welcome our teams back, because as we welcome them back, one of our first conversations should be, what do we want our environment to look like this year as a team? As a team, not just for students. First, we need to frame out what do we want. And I call them non-negotiables when I'm leading team retreats. Like, how do we get to the non-negotiables for us as a unit, as a team? And at the Amazing Parish Conference, a statement that was made by Father White that I won't forget was, we have to love each other enough to enter the conflict. And that's so important. I have taken that. that statement to heart, and I've used it in retreats that I've led, faculty and teams and school leaders that I've led, and in my own family with Michael, 33 years, my two grown adult children. Like when we're feeling people step away and not and are maybe not making a conscious choice, but they are stepping away from not belonging in our identified team, whatever that looks like, family unit, school unit, diocesan unit. We have to love each other enough to enter the difficult conversation and say, I see you, Anita. I see you were not engaging. And I want you to know whatever it is, I'm here for you. Or you might want to not engage, but here's the rules. Remember, we talked about what we want our environment to look like. We're all going to choose to engage. And so it takes the emotion out of the conversation when we're talking about those team dynamics. And creating that team framework, I think, is essential to that sense of belonging. Once we have the framework, we can operate within it, and build and strengthen.
And what you were describing, Denise, truly is authenticity, right? You're giving people buy-in and empowerment because they are part of, they have a seat at the table,
Yes.
right? You know, in the research that I did, this is something that was so simple that I was just, it was like a duh moment for me.
Light
When
bulb.
I was doing my research, what I found was I was talking to a group of African American students and asking them about their sense of belonging. And they're like, you
Mm.
know, I came here because of, and they listed off a bunch of things, right? And I'm thinking, okay, so, you know, why don't you feel like you belong? And this is what I found. Um, the students that didn't feel like they belonged there didn't feel like it because they weren't a member of the track team or the volleyball team or the choir, right? They didn't feel like they didn't belong because they didn't have a place to live or they didn't have friends or faculty that looked after them and wanted the best for them academically. It wasn't any of that. It was simple things like I was recruited to be on the X team. I live in Dallas, Atlanta, Denver, San Diego, right? Big cities. And I've just been recruited to live in a town with less than 20,000 people. Where do I get my hair cut?
Sure.
Where do I go to get my beauty
Ah,
products? What,
breaking the
like,
code.
right? And I was just like, oh my gosh. And and I turned that research over to the university and I
Awesome.
said, I need you to know this. Like this is kind of, to me, it was like, oh my gosh, it can't be this simple. And they honestly said to me, we never thought of it that way. Well, because we didn't put our, just what you said, we didn't love each other enough to enter the conflict. Did anyone ask?
See, okay, so that's so exciting because I will tell you in my research, in my one-on-one interviews in my during my dissertation research, same. One of the teachers I met with, less than 5 years in the classroom, and when I asked the series of questions approved by the IRB, I said, tell me, joy of the job. And this teacher, unfortunately, was choosing to leave the profession, and she broke down and cried. And what she shared was so heartbreaking because she shared she had been there for 2 years and still didn't have a rhythm of the calendar of the campus, and always felt like she was always a step behind in planning because she didn't, and she ate alone. So it's those, how do you break the code of your campus? And I would tell my school leaders that it's important, like, what is your, we all have an employee handbook, but what is it to be a St. Augustine faculty and staff member? Here's our lexicon. Here's what the acronyms mean. Here are our calendar, and here's why this event is important. It might seem silly, but we've been doing it for 80 years. And so, and here's the history behind it. So those kind of things, like you're right, where to get a haircut? How do I survive with the basic needs when you're talking about Maslow, that sense of belonging? I need to have a playbook. I need to know how to break the code. And sometimes we'll see that happening, as you mentioned, that disengagement. We see teachers sitting alone in the classroom. We think, oh, we're going to let them have some quiet time. What they really just might need is someone to invite them to sit with them.
It's interesting that you say that. Sometimes I think we live in each other's head. Um, I was the principal. I did not, most principals enjoy to some respect lunch duty. I never liked lunch duty. And here's why. I didn't mind cleaning up the tables. I didn't even mind the noise, right? Like I didn't mind any of that. I didn't mind sometimes I was in high school principal, so maybe you have a fight here or whatever. What made me not want to do it, but I did it, was it absolutely tore my heart out seeing kids eating by themselves.
Oh, yeah. That was one of
And
our
so
non-negotiables as a school when I was a principal.
so I got into the habit of I would go and say to the kid, "Hey, what are you doing today? Blah blah blah. What are you trying to figure out how you're going to ask out your this girl or this guy?" Or I'd just be some silly goofy thing, and that was my end of trying to gauge, did they want to stay alone, right? Did they want, is there a reason? And if they didn't give me a good reason, like, no, I got into a fight with my dad this morning, I got to figure it out, or no, I've got a big test, I need quiet, whatever. If they didn't give me something good, I would go over to my kiddos who were always willing to go and do and be and all the things. I'd say, hey, I need you to go sit by blah blah blah, because they cannot give me a good reason for the reason they're sitting alone. And they would do it every single time. In fact, it got to the point where they'd see me walking to the table and they're like, all right, where you want us, And, but what I never did, Denise, and I kick myself for that now, is I never did that for my teachers,
Mm. But you,
right?
but you're
I
giving
never,
that advice now.
I'm giving that, and that's why I say a lot of my stuff are things that either I give because I know it works, or I give because I've been on the other side of what didn't work and now I know better. Right. And so um, I look back and I think, we had good culture in the schools that I was in. That was my thing of creating the culture.
Yeah.
But I missed that golden nugget, like how much better it could have been. And again, you look back and you're like, I wish I had, but now I know. And so I'm moving it forward. But, again, let's start with the adults. We are worried about our kids. Are our kids eating? Are our kids in a safe environment? Do they have heat or air conditioning or water? You and I both know that there are plenty of teachers in our
Yeah.
Catholic schools that is a reality for them every day, because they're teaching because of their love of God and Christian formation, and not necessarily a paycheck.
That's right. But we still have those, you're right. And so we have to have those basic needs met. And I've been blessed to serve alongside some amazing principals who even looked at having their community purchase homes so that teachers could come and house together. That's for next time on when we talk about our strategies and bring out our toolbox because um, man, it's exciting. I could talk to you. I agree. You're in Omaha, I'm in the DC area, but man, we could talk all day and passionate about serving others. I want to just talk about if I wanted you to give like two reflection prompts that I'd like those listening to reflect on before we come together July 6th. When we're looking at school leaders unwinding, which is essential, and I hope that they're all getting some quiet time and preparing for the 26-27 school year, what are two reflection prompts, just two, that they can hold in their heart and reflect on and come back and get some strategies on the 6th?
So the first one, which is actually then a kind of a sneak peek into what we will be talking about on the 6th, is what was the perceived reality of your school this last school year?
Mm,
And I
that's
know that may seem a little complex, but sit for a minute and think, what I know what I think the reality was. What was the perceived reality of our sense of belonging or our culture in our school last year? That will not only be intentional personal reflection, but it will force folks to reach out to others in the school and ask for that authentic feedback.
I was going to say, because if I haven't surveyed my team or my parents, which I'm a huge believer in, If I haven't surveyed them, and that's not a best practice I've adopted yet, what are some other ways? They could send an email, they could send a survey to their teams and
Mhm.
make it anonymous, of course, and just 3 to 5 questions, no more than five, right? Just to get a
Mhm.
pulse check. Yeah, that's good.
And I think the other reflective question they can ask themselves is, what is one thing I know that I can improve when it comes to the culture of my building for next year?
Mm.
Because as leaders at the end of the year, when we go back and do our mind check of what was going on, there's always something we missed, right? Or there was something at the end of the year that we're like, I have to remember that for next year. Well, if we're taking the time during the summer and we're honestly reflecting on that, let's go back to that. Whether it was notes we left for ourselves or we still have our full memory intact and we can remember that,
Mm.
let that be what we lead with this year, because what that also provides for our community is a sense of continuity, which is
Mm.
also a strain of the sense of belonging.
I love that. It's about the rhythm, not a one-time activity. Um, and I like the idea of you encouraging school leaders to reflect on that. One thing that I was able to do as a school leader, I was a crisis school leader, right? I was called a turnaround principal, where I came into crisis environments and created schools with positive school cultures. And one thing I learned, and I learned this from Monsignor Chuck, is to send out that survey in the summer to glean some insight and to use that to help build the Welcome Back Week, right? And so that your faculty and staff could see that you heard them and you're using their voice to plan and build for the new year. Um, of course, that was in 2012. And since then, I've done a plethora of research on that that just affirms that that's a good best practice.
Mhm.
But one thing I remember learning, Anita, about that rhythm is that, and kind of getting a sense of the perception. I didn't realize on one of the schools that I took over as a school leader was there was a lot of hurt from non-faculty. For those who didn't teach, they felt less than in this one environment. And so by gathering that feedback, I was able to really kind of restructure how we looked at monthly team meetings where it included everyone, right? Because everyone is a part of the mission. And it might have only been the first 20 minutes that everyone was invited, but that was where we built esprit de corps. That's where we built one team, one mission. And then the custodian and everyone else would not have to stay for the grade level band, focused area discussions. But it's it's that little thing. Had I not been told that there was a hurt feelings, that it would have ruined the whole year because my foundation would have been cracked from the get-go, right? So thank you for those two reflections. That's important, and I'm looking forward to the strategies you're going to bring to the conversation as we continue. Yeah, go ahead. What do you have?
Well, I think what I want to talk about is just kind of lead into people think about this is the author Jeffrey Cohen has a term called situation crafting.
Mm,
And it really
very good.
is not a lot, but it encompasses so much. And I'll give a sneak peek to that. Perceptual surveys, like you said, are very important. And I can remember, I came into a new building and I did perceptual surveys and I kept on getting this constant thing, like 2 or 3 years in a row, that I'm not approachable, that
Mm,
I am intimidating. And I'm thinking, hi, but I have an open door policy. I walk around and talk to the teachers. I talk to the parents. I talk to the students. I'm sitting on the floor with them at times. Like, I don't understand I got really upset about it because I didn't want that perception of me
sure.
to
Yeah.
be the reality. So I summoned up the gumption and I went to two of my teachers that I knew were not always on my side. And I said to them, I've been reading the perception surveys, blah, blah. This continues to be a theme these first couple of years. And I need to really address that. Can you give me some kind of insight? Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
I said,
Maxine
okay,
Green
please.
would be so proud of you as a
Yeah.
reflective practitioner.
And they said, whenever you're out in the hallways or you're in a meeting or whatever, you always stand like this,
Mm.
arms crossed. You stand there and you just stand there and you're very tall and you just stand there like that. And that's just intimidating. And no one wants to come up and talk to you if you have your arms crossed like that. And I thought,
Okay.
I would have never in a million years thought, because I'm have a smile on my face. It's not like I'm growling at people,
And you're a joyful
but
person.
so I purposely made sure that my walkie-talkie that I usually had clipped to my belt, whenever I was out of my office, I would purposely hold it in one hand or the other so that I couldn't cross my hands. And if someone came up to talk to me, I purposely brought it down to my waist and put both my hands on. Like it was almost like I
Your
was
red
Bob
shoe
Dole
reminders.
with Bob Dole with his pen because he couldn't use his left side, right? So people would
Yes.
try, right? I had to adopt that, but I was so put aghast like that. And so that's the one thing I changed that year. That is the one thing I focused on
Mm.
that I changed. So that year's I waited for those perception surveys. I went from like a 50% approval to 80% approval. Just
That's such courage. I mean, it takes courage to lead, it takes courage to teach, but it takes courage to ask others for feedback. And that's where we really have to put on that growth mindset. I mean,
mm-hmm.
when I was at, I'm gonna just share this with you. When I was asked to do this YouTube channel and to put myself out there, I was so afraid. I'm like, no, 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 I have a blog. I'm like, not gonna. And
Right.
but I had to say, people are gonna critique me, and that's okay. And I'm gonna
But
look and I'm gonna look
you
foolish. And you know what? I'm I'm closer to 60 than 50. I can look foolish. It's
well,
okay.
that's the beauty of women like us who are in the ages of 50s and 60s, where we've been through enough that things don't flutter us like they used to. The other thing I've realized, Denise, they're going to critique us anyway.
That's
Why
right.
not know about it?
That's right. And here's the thing. When we're talking about our why in education, we start with the end in mind. It's always to make a difference for children.
Mm-hmm.
And as
Absolutely.
you mentioned, if that is a constant in our mind, wouldn't we want to get feedback for all those that we serve? Because if we get our
Absolutely.
teacher feedback and our team's feedback, then the environment's going to be more joyful. If we get our parents' feedback, they're going to be happy. And then when we have that environment, the children are happy because, as you mentioned, they know, they see, and the research supports that. That's why it's important that we're all unified in mission and word and action. And I love that. I'm never going to forget that walkie-talkie analogy, and I might have to use that actually as I go into my retreat. So that's exciting. So here we are. We've talked about belonging, and that's going to segue into um, how do we strengthen that and use strategies for building a strong school culture on July 6th. But as Anita, as we close out episode one, what's one word of encouragement you would offer to school leaders who are taking this time, watching this episode, and journaling to reflect on how they can be their best version of self as they prepare for the new school year?
Um, persistence.
Ah, persistence. Haven't heard that in a bit. Can you put some framing around that for me?
Um, I think persistence has some granular levels of that take your gloves off and work in the mud type of thing, right? Like
Mm,
you are forging forward with what you believe and what you've been shown is right for children and for the adults in your building. And sometimes that can be messy.
yeah,
Sometimes you have to get dirty,
yeah.
figuratively, of course, with what it is you need to do.
Mm.
And that's okay. Just be persistent
I
because persistence means you're continuing to show up.
I love that. I love that. And sometimes when we're persistent, we need to have the permission to find someone. I have you, and I'm blessed with those that the Lord has placed on my path in this journey of life that can fill my bucket when I need it. So we can
Mhm.
be persistent, but we need to find those who are going to be affirming and give us joy. And I hope that through our conversation over this summer series, Anita, is that we will be hope distributors and joy distributors, and
Absolutely.
that we will be able to, through our strategies and our words of wisdom and experience, that we, as we say thank you to all those who choose to serve in education, um, that we will be helping them, the leaders of this upcoming school year, new and old, feel better about walking into their schools and with courage and persistence and strategy and framework for the new school year because belonging matters, people
Mhm.
matter. When people feel seen, known, valued, and connected to the mission, schools are more joyful, stable, and hope-filled places of learning are why. Before we wrap up this episode, Anita, you know I'm an Army veteran. I would be remiss if I did not thank all of our brothers and sisters who have or are currently serving our great nation as the United States celebrates its birthday here in a couple days. So, um, I want to thank you for joining, sharing the good with Dr. Denise Ball, this episode one of our summer series on belonging. On July 6th, we're going to talk about school culture. And then on the 14th, joy of the work. Um, Anita, you're inspiring, and I know that the work that you're doing is makes a difference in the Archdiocese of Omaha. Um, and I just want to thank you for you choosing to say yes, because the job as a leader is never easy, and sometimes thankless. And but you do it with such grace. And so I just want to thank you for being with me today. And I know that you'll join me in lifting all those who choose to watch this episode. We can lift them up in prayer. I lift up all schools, teachers, and leaders on Thursday. So Thankful Thursday is the day that I lift everybody up in prayer who serve in education. So, Anita, be assured that every Thursday you're in my prayers and for you
Thank you.
choosing to say yes to the calling to serve. So, thank you for being with me. And I will look forward to continuing the conversation on July 6th. Have a blessed, happy, joy-filled July 4th. And until we meet again, I hope everyone will continue to share the good because when we train our eyes to see the good, amazing things happen.